Appeals to the past are among the commonest of strategies in interpretations of the present. What animates such appeals is not only disagreement about what happened in the past and what the past was, but uncertainty about whether the past really is passed over and concluded, or whether it continues, albeit in different forms, perhaps. This problem animates all sorts of discussion about influence, about blame and judgment, about present actualities and future priorities. The Bible tells a story of a war thousands of years ago between the Philistines and the Israelites. The Philistines had a champion by the name of Goliath. 9 feet tall, he towered over men, heavily armed and armored. Every day, he would challenge the Israelites and ask for a champion to duel him. Everyone was terrified, except for a shepherd named David, who was happy to take on the challenge. He faced Goliath unarmored with nothing but a sling, and kills him in one blow with a rock to the forehead. Everyone celebrated him, and he even ascended to the throne of the kingdom of Israel. This heroic allegory has been used in the last century by comparing it to the modern Israeli nation-building project. Israel is framed as the small, weak David against the powerful and united Arab Goliath. We often see this compared to the 1948 war, which led to the creation of Israel. In this war, massacres such as the one at Deir Yassin took place, where Zionist paramilitary groups, namely Irgun and Lehi, supported by the Haganah, murdered over 100 Palestinian men, women, and children, throwing their bodies into wells. They broadcasted what they had done to terrify Palestinians into fleeing their homes. By the end of what is known today as the Nakba, 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their land. This has caused to question the Israeli narrative of David and Goliath. Perhaps David was in fact our Goliath, and there is no better example of this than the Six-Day War of June 1967. On the 12th of May in 1967, Russia sent misinformation to Egypt, one of its Middle Eastern allies, claiming that Israel, the United States ally, was massing troops at the Syrian border. Egypt was in a defensive agreement with Syria at the time and could not be seen doing nothing to a perceived threat, so they sent around 100,000 troops to the Israeli border in the Sinai Peninsula. They brought with them around 1,000 tanks, mostly outdated Soviet tanks, T-34 and T-55s, and this was done as a defensive measure to deter Israel from attacking Syria. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, and his government knew that they would not stand a chance against Israel in an all-out war. This is not helped by the fact that Nasser had a considerable number of his forces fighting a proxy war with Saudi Arabia in Yemen. Israel knew this, and America knew this as well. Egypt going to war with Israel would be futile. Egypt mobilizing its troops was not the start of the war, however. The official trigger to the war happened on the 22nd of May when President Nasser declared the Straits of Tiran closed to Israeli shipping and blocked the Gulf of Aqaba. This was Israel's maritime route to the Red Sea and Asian markets. Israel saw this as a just cause for war. The reasoning by the Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan is that this economic attack is an existential threat to Israel and justifies a preemptive attack on Egypt after diplomacy failed. On June 4th, Israel finishes their preparation for Operation Focus, a plan to destroy Egyptian air forces before a war can start. On June 5th, just before 5 a.m., Israel deployed most of its air force, mainly their Mirage 3s they had purchased from France. This was a state-of-the-art jet capable of going more than twice the speed of sound. The Arab forces planes, the MiG-17, could not break the sound barrier, and the MiG-21 was not as maneuverable as the Mirage. This would not be of great importance, however, because the Israeli planes flew below radar detection and reached Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian airfields unseen, cratering the runways so that the planes could not take off, then bombing most of their air forces. The first airfields were hit around 7 a.m., and the last were hit around noon. The whole operation lasted about 5 hours. The few Egyptian MiGs that did manage to take off and try to face the Mirages were quickly overwhelmed and shot down. In the Sinai, Egyptian troops had been waiting for weeks at key junctions like Katef and Abu-Lughod and had no knowledge that their air cover had been destroyed when Ariel Sharon's 38th Division began raining artillery down on them. The Egyptian forces had been taken by surprise. They frantically shot into the desert at an attacker they could not see. Meanwhile, Israeli Patton tanks flanked the Egyptian trenches. Egyptian defenses cracked. Field Marshal Avner rejected an organized retreat plan and called for an immediate withdrawal. As thousands of troops were crowding the roads in an attempt at a swift retreat, they made easy targets for Israeli jets since there was no Egyptian air cover. By June 8th, Israel had taken the Sinai all the way down to the southern tip at Sharm el-Sheikh, establishing maritime control, effectively destroying Nasser's blockade. Israel's framing of this war as them being David against a more powerful Arab Goliath requires Israel to be acting in self-defense. After all, David only fought Goliath to protect his people. This brings us to the ongoing debate of whether this war was a war of choice or a war of no choice. For Israel to be correct, and for it to have been a war of no choice, the preemptive strike must have been out of necessity to protect its people's survival. The argument was that the blocking of the Straits of Tiran was an existential threat. However, this was not the case since Israel was not reliant on shipping from the Straits. In May, the potential for war had risen, but the United States and the Soviet Union had come together to stop Israel from launching a strike. The states had made it clear to Prime Minister Eshkol that they were preparing actions to open the Straits to shipping from all nations. France also warned Israel against attacking. By the end of May, escalations had mostly ceased, and Israel had good reason to think that the Straits would likely open in the near future. Israel clearly sensed the de-escalating climate since Defense Minister Moshe Dayan said on June 3rd that it is too late for a spontaneous military reaction to Egypt's blockade of the Tiran Straits. He knowingly said this as Operation Focus was being finalized and awaiting approval. He later admits in his autobiography that at the press conference, without being explicit, I was hoping that the impression might be gained that we were not about to go to war, but were intent on exhausting all the diplomatic possibilities. Dayan deliberately used de-escalating tensions to strike Egyptian airfields when they least suspected it. Israel's legal argument is that military retaliation was self-defense. While the US endorsed Israel's right to the Straits, they did not endorse enforcing it with military action. Self-defense must be done proportionally and when necessary. For this reason, it is hard to argue that this was a war of no choice. Orientalism is never far from what Dennis Hay has called the idea of Europe, a collective notion identifying us Europeans as against all those non-Europeans. On the first day of the war, Jordanian forces had begun attacking Israel with artillery strikes as a response to their attack on Egypt. This caused fighting to break out in Jerusalem, both sides using small arms fire to avoid hitting holy sites. Egypt gave Jordan false information that they were highly successful at fending off the IDF to hide their defeat and keep Jordan from withdrawing. Many battles ensued in the Jordan-administered West Bank, culminating at the Battle of Ammunition Hill. The Jordanians had no tanks in Jerusalem and had few anti-tank weapons. Their only option was to fight with small arms. This was not ideal either since they were mainly armed with obsolete American rifles, the M1 Garand. They had few fully automatic machine guns. The Israelis, however, had tanks and fully automatic rifles, and other guns, namely the Uzi and FN-FAL. After several battles, the Jordanians made a last stand at their only heavily fortified location in Jerusalem, Ammunition Hill. This was a British ammo depot during the British Mandate, and complex winding trench systems were built throughout the 50s. Israeli forces began by bombing the trench system and bunkers, trying to do the most damage possible before sending paratroopers into the trenches from many different sides. There was confusion as both sides navigated the complex trench systems in the dark, most of the light coming from grenade and artillery explosions. The combat was mostly close quarters, fought with guns. There were heavy casualties on both sides. This battle opened the way for Israel to take the rest of the city and most of the West Bank after the Jordanian retreat. By the end of the day, on June 7th, the Arab portion of Jerusalem had fallen to Israel, along with the West Bank. After the retreat, the UN called for a ceasefire. Both Egypt and Jordan were defeated. Syria had not stopped shelling Israel even after the ceasefire. In response to this, on June 9th, Israel attacked with airstrikes and tanks fighting uphill. With Israel's total air superiority, they were able to quickly defeat the Syrians and capture the Golan Heights by the end of the day on June 10th. Israel was previously opposed to taking the Golan Heights in fear of a long conflict with Syria. But when the Arab forces weakened, Israel seized the opportunity. The fact that Arab forces outnumbered the IDF supports the claim that Israel was the smaller faction in this war. A big part of why Israel felt threatened was that Egypt, Jordan, and Syria were in a defensive pact. The worry was that if Israel had to defend itself, it would have to face a coordinated attack on 3 fronts. This was not the case, however. The fragility of the defensive pact was apparent. Israel had shot down Syrian planes prior to the start of the war, with no retaliation from Jordan and Egypt. Moreover, relations between the members of the pact were strained. One example of this was President Nasser accusing King Hussein of Jordan of being a CIA agent. While during the war, Israel did have to contend with all 3 nations, they fought in a disjointed manner, and there was little communication between the 3. Jordan and Syria did not know for a while the extent of the damage done to Egypt early in the war. If they were one large Goliath, the arm would know when the leg is injured. During every stage of the war, it is also clear that the Arab forces were ill-equipped, most of their equipment being older Soviet-made tanks, outdated guns, and mostly outdated planes. This does not fit the description of a well-armed Goliath, while Israel had the latest tanks and supersonic jets. In addition to this, there was the nuclear element. Despite Israel's policy of nuclear ambiguity, there is strong evidence that by 1967 Israel had a nuclear bomb. Brigadier General Yitzhak Yaakov had made a plan in case things went wrong in the war to detonate a nuclear weapon to deter Arab forces. While they did not want to use this, the fact that the plan existed, that they had the capability, and that they did not need to resort to a nuclear detonation says enough. The relationship between the Occident and Orient is a relationship of power, of domination, of varying degrees of a complex hegemony. The war was fought on the Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian front, yet they were not the ones who were dealt the greatest amount of unnecessary suffering. The ones who had were the Palestinians. In 1947, a partition plan was made to create both a Jewish and Arab state on the land of Palestine. When the Palestinians protested this, the newly born Israel responded by expelling them. In some of the battles that took place, Israel failed to accomplish its goal. In 1967, once the war had started and Israel saw military success, their goal expanded from their perceived self-defense to opportunistic conquest of Palestinian territory. Gaza was occupied, and the West Bank was occupied, along with an estimated 250,000 refugees fleeing to Jordan. Moshe Dayan had made an order to return these refugees to avoid the shame that the Nakba had brought on Israel. This was ineffective, however, because after the expulsion, there was an order to destroy Palestinian villages to prevent their return. A plan had existed since 1963 as a revenge for 1948 and opportunistically carried out in this war to destroy the Latrun area villages. A nun who witnessed these events said, "Here is what the Israelis don't want us to see. 3 villages that were destroyed systematically with dynamite and bulldozers. Alone, in death-like silence, the donkeys walk out amidst the ruins. Here and there, a crushed piece of furniture or a torn pillow peek out from the clumps of plaster, stones, and cement. Israeli tractors from nearby kibbutzim are quick to plow the Arab lands. After the ceasefire, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed Resolution 242 to settle the matter of conquered territory. This resolution expresses its continuing concern with the grave situation in the Middle East, emphasizing the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and the need to work for a just and lasting peace in which every state in the area can live in security. The first part affirms that the fulfillment of charter principles requires the establishment of a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, which should include the application of both the following principles. 1. Withdrawal of Israel armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict. And 2. Termination of all claims or states of belligerency and respect for the acknowledgement of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of every state in the area, and the right to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries free from threats or acts of force. Israel interpreted the first principle, withdrawal of Israel armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict, as some of the territories rather than all. They claim this based on the absence of the word the or all the before territories. This interpretation is wrong for a few reasons. First, the absence of the or all the is not an implication that it means only some. If there is a sign in front of a store saying animals are prohibited, are we to assume that some animals are prohibited or all? Second is the fact that this resolution is written in one sentence. The only full stop is at the very end of the resolution text. Therefore, it must be interpreted in unison, not in independent sections which can be applied or not applied selectively. In the beginning, it clearly states the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war, which affirms that as a whole it is inadmissible to acquire territory by war. Now, when looking at the section where Israel is told to withdraw from the territories occupied in the war, it directly implies that all the territories were inadmissibly acquired, hence they must withdraw from all of them. In today's discourse about a solution to this ongoing conflict, the most popular idea is the two-state solution. There are many ways of achieving this, but the one that is talked about as being the most realistic is creating a Palestinian state based on the borders established in 1967. This is why the two-state solution is criticized by some, since it reinforces illegal occupation. This is also why this event is known to the Palestinians as the Naksa, or the setback, the war where their Goliath occupied their land and made the prospect of a Palestinian state even more unlikely.